Hey again, everybody. The Packers are going to the NFC Championship Game. I don't think I've seen a season like it. Tom Pippins, along with Gary Ellerson and John Dodds. The latter is the Packers historian. The former is the ex-Badger and Packers running back. Star of the show on The Big Show, 105.7 FM The Fan, and Spectrum News 1 with Leroy Butler and Dennis Krause. Gary, your thoughts on the win over Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. Again, it got very, very anxious for everybody.
I thought for them, right, for the Packers, I thought Matt LaFleur's best coaching job he's done here. I mean, I think he had him off balance for the better part of the day. You know, a lot of motion with Davante Adams, a lot of sharp motion. You knew they wanted to get the run game going. I mean, you got 21 carries out of your running back, but only for 60 yards. Not a lot, but the 21 carries was kind of keeping that offense off balance. And they got a little bit more creative to get some run yards with some reverses, with some sweeps out of other players outside of Aaron Jones. So really, I thought a great offensive game plan by Matt LaFleur, and maybe the best game that Aaron Rodgers, I thought, has played within that offense, along with Davante Adams.
I think you are right on, as always. And, John, back to Adams. My goodness, 160 yards, I believe, a Packers playoff record. He was unbelievable, wasn't he?
Yeah, I was talking to some of the defensive backs in the Seattle locker room, and they were saying that he and Diggs, the safety, said that he and Keenan Allen are the two best route runners in the NFL.
Yes.
He can cut better than anyone. His straight line speed may not be the best, although it looked pretty good on the one touchdown. It did. It looked he was playing fast, but his route running ability, and as Gary pointed out, the being able to run the ball, or having the threat of running the ball, that 23-yard run early in the game by Aaron Jones,
yes,
about half his yards that he had the whole game, it seemed like. But that threat, and then the addition of Ervin, that pickup in December, yes, you thought it was just going to be for punt returns, but now you have a jet sweep option that has to be respected, and it seemed like, as Gary pointed out, that's what I saw. I saw the same thing where they were running motion and opening up everything else because you have to respect that jet sweep.
The Packers are now 8-1 in games decided by 8 points or less. Seattle coming in was 11 up and 2 down in that category, and they certainly came back. But Gary, we talk about number 12, and I agree with you. His numbers weren't gaudy, but at 16 of 27, 243, 2 touchdowns, and 9 yards per throw. That was impressive.
Yeah, I think that's probably about right in his wheelhouse within this offense of what they're trying to get done. I mean, you know, Mike McCarthy's offense was a little bit different. I mean, maybe it reminds you of the old Raiders offense where they want to get the football down the field a lot. But this offense feels like it's more of a ball control type offense, and they want to run some clock a little bit. They want to run game off of that. I mean, it's a lot like San Francisco's offense. They want the quarterback to get the ball out of their hands quickly and then take advantage of some matchups. I thought Matt LaFleur, those guys did a great job of taking advantage of the matchups that they got with Davante Adams. And what they did was, I thought, they showed you a heavy run formation, but you got a dose of Davante Adams with a pass out of that run formation. They were committed to the run in that they were giving you a one high safety, and they ran into the one high safety, meaning that they ran into the extra guy in the box. That's why you only got maybe 60-some yards out of Aaron Jones, but they still made an effort to do it. And I thought that's why the offense probably worked a little bit better than it had in weeks past, because they were really committed to the run, no matter how many yards that they got. You're right, JD. That first carry, 20-some yards, and really that was it. But there was always a threat that Aaron Jones could do it, and they were committed to stop him.
John, you mentioned it earlier, and Matt LaFleur said it in a news conference. I've never seen anyone as fine with his route running as number 17 and Davante Adams. The defense struggled. They were gassed in the second half. 3 straight possessions, touchdowns. You knew Russell Wilson was coming. They couldn't stop him. But they got a big sack from Preston Smith. They get the ball over to the Pack. And, John, when they needed third downs, and weren't they something like 9 of 13 where they've struggled all season in that category, and Jimmy Graham in particular, along with Davante, coming up big.
Yeah, that was – Rodgers was 16 for 27, but he had 6 balls where he threw away just to avoid a sack or nobody was open. So he was fine and sharp. The passes he hit Jimmy Graham in the first quarter over the top toward the Seattle bench. He dropped it in. That one pass that he threw on 3rd and 9 in the fourth quarter to Davante Adams that kept the drive going, that was over the top. That might have been the best throw of the year.
Yes.
I mean, that was
both of those were
both
nice.
of those were
Yes.
nice. Pip, you're right. Where they came up big was the sack by Preston Smith. That forced a punt because that was, do you go for it? And I think they would have gone for it. But and then the other really big play was Jair Alexander blitzing in. He didn't get credit for a sack because you don't get a credit for a sack on a 2-point conversion. But he came in and he sacked Russell
What do they
Wilson.
call that?
They
A
did,
tackle?
It's nothing. The only thing that happens.
They call it John Dodds.
The only thing they call it stat-wise, I think, is if they score. If he picks it up, he can go in for a 2 points. But in the Seattle locker room, the media was asking, what's the problem with Seattle? It seems like Seattle falls behind. They did it in both San Francisco games. They did it in the Green Bay game. But then they come back and with a furious comeback. And I'm sitting there listening to that, and I said, I can answer that, why that happens. It's because Russell Wilson might be the best player in the NFL. That guy was amazing. Wasn't he amazing? I mean, the Packers were exhausted by the end of in the third quarter, you could see it, and in the fourth quarter,
hanging out.
he threw that pass where he was being sacked at about the 30. He threw the sideline to Homer, who runs it down to the 6. Amazing.
And as you've said in previous shows, Russell Wilson, maybe you said it, Gary, he's like 5'11", but he is built like a linebacker. So he runs over people as well as around them. Mike Pettine's plan and how you think the defense did overall against the Seahawks.
I thought they did great. I mean, it's a different type of offense that you're playing against, and that John talked about it, is that with Russell Wilson. I mean, he showed the levity of that he can have on a game in the second half, but it just wears on you. It's like a prize fight. It's like for Russell Wilson, it's body blows, body blows, body blows. First, second quarter, third quarter. Now all of a sudden he's really now taken off and upped his game a little bit. Now he's punching you in the face. So what ends up happening is he wears a defense down. It's almost akin to if you had like a big back and you were handing it to him like 30 times a game, and it wears the defense down. But Russell Wilson is a little bit different because now he's got these defensive guys chasing him all over the place. I saw one sack by Kenny Clark. I thought it was absolutely outstanding, where he missed Russell Wilson, right? And then got up and got him again. That takes a lot out of a 300-pounder when you're trying to chase a guy. And by the time you get to mid-third quarter, fourth quarter, your defense is worn down. They won't have that problem, trust me, in San Fran because Garoppolo is not that type of quarterback.
I look forward to discussing that on the next podcast, which we're going to get to in just a few minutes after a timeout. Back to Davante. There's some sort of a stat. There are stats all over the place these days. But apparently in that game, Gary, Davante got a yard more separation than the average receiver. How does that happen? Does it again go to his route running? And Rodgers said he's starting to feel like he did with Jordy Nelson. That chemistry, that connection between 12 and 17.
Well, maybe that foot injury that he had early in the year is probably feeling a little bit better because I thought his feet were just awesome in this particular game. And maybe he's finally getting some relief with his feet. Once again, maybe it's the offense. We talked about this offense at nauseum a little bit about how they may not all be on the same page, and maybe they're finally figuring that out where they're now all getting on the same page. With Rodgers is getting his timing down with Davante Adams, and Rodgers and LaFleur seeing eye to eye on what the game plan is going to be about. And I think you're probably getting a concerted effort amongst everybody within that offense to trying to get better and just try to hone in their skills, what they're doing offensively.
I talked to Shaq Griffin in the locker room, and might be my most favorite interview in 40 years. That guy really has a lot going in terms of he's personable to the media. If I could give advice to other NFL players, you could get a lot more out of your career if you just would be cordial to the media like this guy was. So what's the key to the Green Bay Packers? He said it's Rodgers and Adams. They can do a two-man game, but you have to be able to run. and we try to make Rodgers one-dimensional by shutting the run down, and but it took, I think, too much effort to do that, and it left Adams open. Seattle plays a base 4-3 defense, the most basic defense in the NFL, so you can do a lot of things to counter it. The Legion of Boom, that era is gone. Sherman's at San Francisco, and he's an older player. So they've lost some things. They still have those linebackers, Wright,
Bobby Wagner,
and Wagner. They're big-time linebackers. But, yeah, Davante Adams is definitely an elite player.
Well, you know, they picked their poisons, which we knew. We knew they were going to say, okay, old man 12, beat us. I think you have to give them credit. They came down and put another guy in the box, single high safety, and they ran the football anyway. They were expecting Rodgers just to get up and throw it all over the place. Right. And that's what he did against the Detroit Lions, because they got single high and they got the extra guy in the box and they threw it and had all those overthrows. In this game, you really didn't get that. You still got a heavy dose of really run formation, which they thought they were going to run it because they were low. But you got play action pass, or you got to pass off of that. I just thought that the game plan, it just felt like, you know, LaFleur was playing chess, and really Seattle, they were playing checkers. They just couldn't figure out what they wanted to do and how they wanted to defend them. If the Green Bay Packers can continue to do this along the way, let's see what happens.
You give them a shot. All right, again, we're going to discuss that shortly. As for Rodgers, Russell Wilson, it was said, you know, he'll beat you with his mind, with his arm, with his feet. Rodgers, not so much the feet part anymore, but actually he had a couple of key runs. He was running like, it reminded me of John Elway, just going broke, JD, and then he had the quarterback sneak for a first down.
Boy, that's one you get nervous on, because
you do.
I don't know if you remember this, but back in 2010, they were at Washington, and they did a quarterback sneak on the goal line, and some of their defensive backs lit Rodgers up, and this is before the concussion protocol. And I think he was 9 of 10 before the hit, and he was 7 of 22 afterward. He was never the same. And he's been concussed a couple of times during his career. Boy, I would stay with that. That was a shocker when I saw that. But the interesting thing about this game is, Pip, at the beginning of the year you asked me, are they closer to 4-12 or are they 12-4? And I said 12-4 if Brian Bulaga, that was one of my first guys, plays. And this year, when Bulaga goes out against Philly, they lose. When he has a bad hand against the Chargers, they lose. When he goes out against San Francisco, they lose. When he walked off the field, walked off of warm-ups, I'm thinking, whoa, and that's a bad sign. And this Valdir comes in. What an acquisition!
Jared Valdir, who was retired, right? And Bulaga, flu-ridden. He's an unsung hero too. I was impressed. I'm glad you brought it up, John, because Matt LaFleur said after, I didn't have to change the things I did. Okay, he wasn't perfect. Maybe he got some help occasionally, especially with Clowney. But overall, how about this kid?
Well, I mean,
who's not a kid? He's a veteran.
A seasoned veteran, right? So I hear the story goes, he heard it on television that Bulaga wasn't going to play.
Yeah. Wow.
And he gets in his car and drives over to the stadium and gets himself ready to go play. He gets over there early, knowing this is where
pro's pro.
That's what you go and get. I mean, we don't talk a lot about Brian Gutekunst and Mark Murphy, but I think from the top down,
that's right,
those guys have done a phenomenal job at assembling some talent around Aaron Rodgers. And I think within a rebuild year for them with the new coach, some new players. I mean, they've got a lot of moving parts going on. I think Mark Murphy and Brian Gutekunst give them listen, you talk about Ervin, you talk about Valdir, those are two key pickups in the middle of the year that really plug some big holes for you.
Absolutely. A final thought from either of you before we take a timeout and then talk about the NFC Championship game against the Niners.
Yeah, they did a great job of chipping on Clowney. The Graham and the tight ends were really helping out both offensive tackles, and then they would delay a little bit. Sometimes when you block, a tight end blocks at the line and there's like a cloaking device. They just lose track of him, and then he kind of came out like a running back. Also, Sternberger really surprises you in terms of he doesn't look like he should have an attitude, but he does a little chippy.
Yeah.
He gets those guys really their blood they're boiling. I can understand why the guy took the cheap shot against them in OTAs during that Houston, because I guess he cheap shot at a Kentucky safety who got drafted by Houston, and when they came up, he lit him up and put him in the concussion protocol for about 6 weeks. But that's nice to see that he's got the young legs and speed, and he's willing to stick his nose in. So if he puts on 10 pounds in the off season, you might have something.
Absolutely. I don't want to be negligent. We are brought to you by our wonderful sponsor at Professional Construction, Inc., Mike and Michelle Grau, doing it for 15 years, not only commercially, at home as well, with remodeling, you name it, but in the community. So very great. Among other fabulous causes, Down Syndrome Association of Wisconsin. 262-363-0886, 262-363-0886. Gary, take us out of here. The former Badger and Packer. This is the Pippin Dodds podcast with Gary Ellerson, and we are brought to you also by our good friends at WisconsinSportsStream.com. Aaron Rodgers going around asking the fellas, I really want one more Super Bowl. I mean, the chemistry, the karma, and they want to win it for him, don't they?
No, they really do. And I think you talk about Jimmy Graham. You can see it in Jimmy Graham, his last game. Aaron Rodgers, I believe, walks up to him sometime during his week and say, hey, we're going to need you, big fella. I'm coming to you. And here's a veteran, player that really haven't had a great year, but you saw in this game played a phenomenal game. I mean, he raised his game. Yeah, so everybody knows in this locker room, NFC Championship Game, you never know when you're going to get there again. And, yeah, these guys want to go get it for old number 12. I mean, it's kind of funny, but it feels like he's almost in the same situation that Brett Favre was, at the end of his career when guys were wanting to play for him and try to get him one more. He carries a big weight, Rodgers does, in the NFL. You saw at the game, you've got stars like Lil Wayne. I mean, you've got Anthony Davis. The Lakers played in Oklahoma City.
You have Gary Ellerson, for goodness
well,
sake.
yeah, I mean, John Dodds.
Well, absolutely.
I mean, all these guys, all these stars are flying in. I mean, they like the Packers, but they're flying into C12. I mean, so sometimes we take him for granted. We forget about how big this guy is on the superstar status. A lot of guys want to see him get this last Super Bowl.
And just so excited, exhorting the crowd at the end, so very grateful and obviously happy. Can they find a way to beat the favored Niners? You guys ready to talk another podcast? We'll take a time out and do it. Okay, coming right back, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.